I want to welcome everyone to the first Provident webinar of 2025. As Provident continues our efforts to give back to those who give so much to their community. I'm your host, Ed Mann, Director of Training and Education. Tonight, we're going to explore the topic of mergers and consolidations with Rob Brady from Rob Consulting and Darryl Keiser, the Fire Chief of the Garden Spot Fire Rescue located in New Holland, PA. I'll go through our Provident slides with you so you know a little bit about our company. Provident got started in 1902 in the Pittsburgh area as an independent insurance agency. And in 1928, they began servicing volunteer fire departments with accident and health policies, better known as relief policies in Pennsylvania. Today, we provide volunteer combination and career firefighters and emergency medical responders with a multitude of programs. We recently started offering our accident and health program and insurance to law enforcement. We're celebrating our 7th year as one of the top insurance employers as rated by the Insurance Business of America magazine. So some of the programs that we offer, obviously, our accidental health and insurance policy. If you're an accident and health client of ours, you and your immediate family members are entitled to use our first responder assistance program, which is a program that is very near and dear to my heart. The 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy. So if you're looking for some type of incentive or benefit to offer to your membership to help with recruiting, that 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy provides a death benefit for somebody who is off duty. So if you have a member who happens to be out hunting, falls out of their tree stand and dies, it would pay a benefit to the family. We have our group term life policy, which is a typical term life policy. Also our critical illness and cancer policy, which provides benefit to individuals who are diagnosed with renal failure, have a heart attack or a stroke, or they're diagnosed with cancer. And I want to back up just a second. In about 23 states now, with our accident health policy, we offer a first diagnosis cancer rider, which means basically it's an option that you can purchase with your accident health program. And it would pay a benefit anywhere from $2,500 to $100,000, depending on the coverage you ask for. And then finally, our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance. If you, which basically we insure your things and your buildings. If you're a property and casualty client, you're entitled to use our Fire Plus Rescue Academy, which is offered through Lexipol's website, Fire Rescue One, and there are over 800 online courses that you're able to take. So tonight we're going to do, so you think you want to merge, fasten your seatbelts and hold on. And as I mentioned earlier, Rob Brady is an emergency services merger consultant, and we have Chief Darryl Keiser from the Garden Spot Fire Rescue with us. I'll stop sharing. All right, now why can't I find the stop share button? All right. Oh, here we go. It moved screens on me. So to set things up tonight, I want to make a couple of things. I want to make a couple of comments, and then I'll have our guests introduce themselves. So before our guests introduce themselves, I want to offer a couple of comments. I spent 14 and a half years as a Pennsylvania State Fire Commissioner, and I consistently supported the premise of mergers and consolidations in communities where and when the emergency services wanted to explore that idea. I want to make it clear that ultimately it was a local decision, and it was never my intention to force a merger or a consolidation, nor was it Rob's intention when he worked for the Department of Community and Economic Development and the Center for Local Government Services. I also want our listeners to know that as a fire chief, I was part of a merger between two fire companies that became officially known as the Chief Logan Volunteer Fire Department in Mifflin County, Pennsylvania on January the 1st of 2020. So not only did I walk the walk. I actually talked the talk in 2019 and 2020. And in all transparency, Rob was the consultant that worked our merger. I also want to remind our listeners of the Station 1902 podcast we record each month, and let you know we recorded a podcast with Rob Brady. Links to our previously recorded webinars and podcasts will be included in the follow-up email that you'll receive from Sam Tallarico, our marketing director. With that as a backdrop, let's have our guests introduce themselves. Rob, let's start with you.
Commissioner, as I still call you to this day, thank you very much for the invitation. Evening, everybody. Thanks for participating tonight. I'm looking forward to get you some basic information. As Ed said, my name is Rob Brady. I'm the owner of Rob Consulting. I do a little bit of everything, from shared services to mergers, consolidations, to strategic planning, special districts, authorities, organizational governance, change management, a little bit of everything. And as the commissioner said, we had the privilege of working together for several years, and in the process, helped a lot of people create the next chapter in the history of their emergency service organizations. So thank you once again for attending tonight.
Chief Green, folks, Chief Keiser, the chief's having some trouble with his camera, so we'll have his voice tonight, but we won't be able to see his face, just so you all understand why he's blacked out. It's not that he doesn't want to show his face, it's just he's having issues with his camera. So Chief Keiser, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, I'm Chief Keiser with Garden Spot Fire Rescue in Eastern Lancaster County. We actually were helped by Rob Brady when he worked with the DCED to merge two departments together and become Garden Spot Rescue back in 2013. We run 3 stations, have about 125 members in our organization, about 80 active firefighters. We run 3 engines, 1 truck, 1 heavy rescue, 1 tanker, 1 air, 3 squads, a utility, 2 boats, and 3 duty buggies. This past year, we ran 583 calls, and we have a great organization. Cover about 30 square miles, a lot of industry, a lot of agriculture, and our mutual aid area is probably 100 square miles.
So, Chief, before we move on, are you an all volunteer or a combination department?
Completely volunteer. We have 2 paid staff. We have a chief of staff that is full-time here at the Station 1. Actually, she's our second chief of staff. Our first chief of staff left us back in May, and then we hired Marie on in August, and she's been doing a great job. Did a full career as a consultant for businesses and traveled all over the country. Her mother got ill and she quit, take care of her mother, and then she wanted to get back in the workforce and take care of or wanted to give back to her community that she was really never part of most of her career. So she's doing a great job coming on board and understanding all the things of the fire service. And then we have a part-time financial secretary that basically supports our treasurer.
So that's got to be a big help to you as a fire chief, to have someone behind the scenes taking care of a lot of day-to-day administrative functions.
Correct. And then basically Chief Larry Martin, who I succeeded, basically went to the board of directors years ago and said, if you want to keep a volunteer, then we need help on the administrative side. And that's kind of where the line that we draw, if you want to call it that, to keep the paid staff on the administrative side.
Okay, great. So Rob, now that we know about Chief Keiser and some of his department, how about telling our listeners about some of the consulting services you actually offer?
Right. I do a pretty broad range of stuff, but you know, it is pretty much anything fire, emergency management, EMS, local government, and in some cases some nonprofit work. I do all types of new partnerships. A lot of places, depending where you go, the word merger or consolidation is a bad word. So I focus on, helping create and I like how you laughed. Yes, can be a very negative word. We won't use any expletives as it's sometimes used, but some kind of new partnership, whether it is through a merger or through a consolidation, a parcel consolidation, some type of regional effort, whether, it's some type of shared services, all those different type of things. We focus on those types of areas. We look at the governance, we look at the administration, we look at, all the different components of any kind of system. And then, of course, we do a lot of other things. We do some organizational governance, some strategic planning, bond and finance work with the attorney that I partner with my business. We do a little bit of everything. And then when many years ago, you and I were sitting in a public meeting and somebody asked me, "Are you an expert?" And positively not. I have some good knowledge and a lot of good experience in a couple wheelhouses. But when people bring in things that I'm not 100% familiar with, or something pops up, I bring in some other good subject matter experts. So we bring a really good, varied team of folks in, so to make sure the client gets what they need. So
Great. So, Chief, or before we move on, Rob, so the word merger consolidation is often used interchangeably.
Mhm.
Is there a significant difference between a merger and a consolidation? And if there is, what is it?
Well, in Pennsylvania, we sort of coined a couple words ourselves just to sort of explain stuff. But the broader concept is merger is pretty much accepted all across the country and Canada, where you have two or more entities coming together and you're creating something new. For a couple, this can take a couple different forms, but one of the big things is the legal part. What kind of entity and what is the resulting or surviving entity? And in Pennsylvania, what we did is, we sort of, created this word consolidation for ourselves. And I use it pretty broadly with a lot of other folks, as outside of PA, when I get inquiries, put proposals together. A merger is two or more coming together, and the surviving entity may or may not change their name. When we do it from a consolidation aspect, whatever that surviving entity, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a government entity, we create it brand new. We create everything brand new, from the articles of incorporation from the EIN number to everything. We do it all new. That's where the difference. At the end of the day, you're creating a new partnership. You're putting something new together. So
Okay. Chief Keiser, you already talked about your department, and so, but I do want to ask you this. And you mentioned earlier there was a chief prior to you, but hopefully you have the history here. What led to your merger consolidation?
Well, and actually, Chief Martin was probably he was the chief of the department at the time that we went through our merger, and was one of the driving forces there, along with one of our members who actually went to a class, I think, at the PA week down at the Emmetsville.
Not the National Fire Academy.
Yeah, and attended a class for a merger. We have basically Liberty Fire Company and Blue Ball Fire Company came together to be Garden Spot Fire Rescue. Liberty Fire Company already operated two stations, which were 2 miles apart, and then Blue Ball Fire Company was another 2 miles apart. And East Earl Township, the township that they serve, there's 3 fire departments within that municipality, and the municipalities were trying to bring these 3 departments together. One of the closed, all 3 stations had land that they wanted to build a station on and bring everybody together, but they were driving the bus. They had community people involved in this fire board that had no clue of the fire service. I recall one night where one of the members is sitting up front at a municipal meeting. He's all excited about Sparky the dog that can go out and do fire prevention, and thought this was the answer to the whole thing. But anyway, actually that municipality at the time was kind of withholding some funds from these departments, and we worked well with Blue Ball, and so we kind of maybe bailed them out of the whole situation that they were dealing with their municipality, and floated the idea of merging with them, coming together as one department. And that kind of got them out of that situation and gave them an upper hand with the municipality. This is the direction that we're going. And then obviously the partnership and the agreement that we have with the two municipalities that we already serve, the East Earl Township then had to comply to that funding model and help in that way.
Okay, so how many municipalities how many fire departments and how many municipalities were involved with your consolidation or merger?
So currently, Garden Spot Fire Rescue now serves 3 municipalities, all of New Holland Borough, 75% of Earl Township, and that was the original Liberty Fire Company. And then we added on Blue Ball Fire Company, which is about 55% of East Earl Township.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that there was apparently an issue with volunteers. And
no, not an issue with volunteers. We got plenty of volunteers. We're fortunate in that way.
Okay, well, but I'm talking prior to the merger, but now you have 125 people.
Yeah, yep.
And 80 active firefighters.
Yep.
And with basically a part-time administrator and a full-time administrator, you have someone taking care of the administrative stuff. And that's been a major benefit.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So this kind of leads to my next question, which kind of goes to Rob. What are some of the primary reasons you see for fire departments that even initiated these discussions? I mean, when they call you on the phone and say, "Hey, Mr. Brady, we'd like you to come talk to us," what are some of the reasons you're hearing that they even want to talk about mergers or consolidations?
Well, the two big things are people and money. They're the two driving forces. A lot of cases that people don't have the numbers of people that they used to have as volunteers. Some places where deal with combination or career departments, they don't have the staffing that they used to. So it's a culmination of people. No matter what type of staffing system you have, it's people. Then the second thing is money. We don't have the money to run the system anymore. As you know, and as Darryl knows, we have a ton of duplication in the system, and that really rises the cost considerably. So people are really looking at those two things as doing it. But one of the nice things that really comes out of this, and I would never say that I'm selective, but I listen considerably when people call me. And why are you doing this? Well, one of my my first question is why are you doing this? And what I think is a healthy place that we've gotten to in a lot of places is that people aren't waiting until their backs are against the wall and something's really bad going on. And Garden Spot's a prime example. When I went down and met with them the first time, they had the people, they had the community support, they had the funding, and their attitude was, we know eventually the system's not going to continue to work as it is. We're going to be forced to do something, so it's better to drive the bus than get ran over by it. And so a lot of departments now, fire or EMS or departments that do both, they're doing it proactively when they're still strong. And their goal is to create that next chapter to make even a stronger organization, and on many different levels.
So, and I don't usually like to make any of these webinars or podcasts about me or what my experience is, but I went through in 2019, late 2018, early 2019, I was the chief of the East Dairy Fire Company here in Mifflin County. I called the fire chief of the Highland Park Fire Company, which was also part of our township, and said, "Hey," I sent him a text message. "Would you like to sit down and talk about a possible merger?" And I got a one-word answer back from him, and it was absolutely. So Bill and I had a conversation. We approached 2 other fire stations, 2 other fire departments about being part of it, and they wanted nothing to do with it. That was fine. We brought the membership together of both organizations and explained to them what we wanted to pursue. And then separately, each fire company voted separately that they wanted to pursue the potential. We reached out to 2 different consultants. Ultimately, we settled with Rob. And it had more to do with the way Rob was willing to work with us. We had one consultant that wanted to charge us several $1,000s just to come and meet with us, just to see whether or not he was interested in taking the job. And so when both companies decided we wanted to pursue it, we had a Saturday morning meeting with Rob. Rob laid out what he could do for us. We told Rob what we needed from him. And then we just kind of moved through the process. People have asked how did you come up with the name? We gave every member the opportunity to nominate a name. And then every member an opportunity to vote on the name. And that's how we arrived at the name. So we had membership participation throughout the process. We gave the membership the opportunity to participate throughout the process. It was, so you had the opportunity to speak up. Were there some people that had the opportunity to speak up who didn't speak up? Yes. They didn't speak up, but they certainly didn't withhold their opinions behind everybody's back. Which, and I point that out because if there's anybody on here tonight that's looking to do is understand that you're going to have people will look you in the eye and tell you they're okay with it, but they're going to backdoor you as soon as they get an opportunity. So just be aware of that. It happens. And all you can do is stay the course. At the end of the day, Bill and I, the chief at Highland Park, at Highland Park at the time, kept telling everybody this isn't about us. It's about us being able to continue to serve the public in a better way. And that's the mindset that we use throughout our work. So, Chief, looking back on the process you used for your and again, I'm understanding now that you weren't there initially.
Oh, I was a part of it. I was on the steering committee.
All right. So what was helpful? What lessons did you learn as you went through the process that will be helpful to any of our listeners here tonight?
Yeah, very similar to what you said is everybody having equal representation, and probably for us that was a little bit harder because Liberty was a bigger department. And we were probably more, like Rob said, on that proactive. Yeah, we're not at the point where we need to merge, but 5-10 years from now, we might need to merge. And the other department was more kind of hamstrung with what they were dealing with their municipalities. But like all of our subcommittees that dealt with different things, identity, and we did the name thing the same way. I think we started out with 54 names and you came and voted for your top 15 favorite or something like that. Because Rob told us right from the get-go, the two biggest challenges would be what color our trucks were and what our name was. Our trucks were already red, so we knew the name would be a challenge. But anyway, but it's not about us. It's about, and I think that's where sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, where we get caught up in our pride, our traditions, and we're not here for pride or traditions. We're here for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. As you said earlier, we're here to serve the community, and that's what we need to do. And so what we wanted to do was build a better fire department that would sustain volunteerism. And so given everybody the equal representation, regularly having town hall meetings, because like you said, there'll be backstabbers, there'll be naysayers and people that stir up trouble. If they don't have information, they'll make up information. No different than our world today, the political world. So they'll make up stuff that is detrimental. And so we had town hall meetings. So there was transparency that, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're talking about. We've considered painting the fire trucks, but we had a discussion about that. We're not going to do that. I'm just using that as like an example, and having everybody heard. And even when they might have an idea that's not going to work, hear them out and help them understand why it's not going to work. Fortunately for us, we only lost about 5 members, I would say, 2 that I can really remember, and basically they didn't engage the process, and that's probably why they walked away, and possibly they were in it for the wrong reasons. So but those are the things, like I said, transparency, helping understand what the real mission is and making sure that you're staying in communication with everybody, that they're understanding the process.
Okay, so we do have a question there, and Chief, you kind of answered the reasons for your merger, behind your merger. It had more to do with local governments and lack of funding and some local government issues. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm correct. If we're gonna I'm on my soapbox now. So if we're gonna sustain volunteerism and the money that we save the municipalities by providing the manpower for fire protection, they need to step up at a greater rate than what they are doing now. We have been taken advantage of for too long. They all know, and sorry, if there's any municipal people on here, I'm sorry, but you know that we'll figure it out one way or another, and you count on that and take advantage of it. And it's about time that the municipalities start stepping up and fully funding trucks and fully funding stations and keeping the lights on in the firehouse instead of us trying to beat our heads against the wall, figure out ways to keep it going, whether it be by chicken barbecues, which do not pay the bills anymore, or, I mean, we have some successful fundraisers that even now we are evaluating for the work that goes into them and the hassle that they are they really worth it?
So there is a question there. It was directed to me, and it was, what's the driving factor that drove you to merge? Why did you need to merge? Well, we weren't having any issues with our local government as far as funding. Our local government funded us, all 3 of the fire stations in our township, very well through a fire tax. There was no complaint there. Most of the time, when you went to the township, if you were able to explain to them why you needed an increase in the appropriation, they were very, very open to it, listened to it. And we were always willing to negotiate, if you give us a little bit this year and maybe the rest of it next year. We actually, it had more to do with the future. We were concerned that if we didn't do what we did when we did it, that within, and hard to predict when, but 3 to 5 years down the road, 5 to 10 years down the road, one or both of us wouldn't even exist. The duplication of services. I mean, you consider we had 2 presidents, 2 vice presidents, 2 sets of trustees, 2 separate fire chiefs, 2 separate assistant chiefs, the whole 9 yards. So ours had more to do with the future than it did with what was going on at the time. And what was going on at the time too is both of us were starting to see diminishing personnel. We didn't have the people. And ultimately that's the reason behind ours. It had more to do with the future. Again, we didn't have any issues with funding. Yeah, it would have been nice to have a lot more money, sure, but we were able to do very well with the funds that we had at the time. So we have a comment in here, says Smoky Lake County town, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Wascatanua and Vilna in process of regionalization after a $200,000 grant for review, input, guidelines for implementation from Transitional Solutions Company. So, after we did our merger, we were looking for funds, and this worked here in PA. We were looking for funds to be able to take care of rebranding. And with a little bit of work and with asking some questions, we were able to secure a $50,000 grant that helped us with rebranding and putting the new names in front of the buildings, putting new logos on the fire apparatus. We didn't repaint any apparatus. East area had red fire trucks. Highland Park had black fire trucks. If you were to walk into the stations now, you'll see a combination of red and black fire trucks. The logos are the same though. And we did what we could to hold on to the history from both stations. So when we took the sign off of Highland Park's building, we put it in their apparatus bay. We took the sign off of East Area's building and we put it in the apparatus bay to hang on to some of the history. So what really hurt us the most was COVID kicked into full gear in 2020 when we were looking to do a lot of public events to, to really roll everything out to the public. And we got hamstrung because of COVID. So, let me see here. All right, let's take this statement here. Gentlemen, government interaction is important. Rob, remember the Lewisberry issues. You must have a business plan involving citizens and local elected officials. Our plan at 68 is 30 years old. Must adjust the plan as your township grows.
Yes,
Agree, Rob?
positively.
Chief,
And we
do you agree? Chief
Oh, yeah,
Keiser.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we see a lot of times, Commissioner, people have no business plan, they have no operating plan, they have no capital plan, or as that one commenter said, it's a plan from 30 years ago and they haven't looked at it. And that can be on the fire and EMS side, can be on the municipal government side. These plans are developed for a reason, and unfortunately, a lot of times they just are set there and they just collect dust. But they should be a living, breathing tool to help you guide your organization. So
So years ago, and I'm going to say years ago, I've been in Provident 10 years now, 10 years next month. So it's been longer than 10 years. Okay. I attended a function that was being sponsored by a planning group, a state level planning group. And I was asked to speak about the fire service. And one of the speakers was a master planner from another part of the Commonwealth. I won't mention where. And he got up and gave a presentation on how terrific their plan was. Their cul-de-sac for plans and high rises and shopping plazas and so on and so forth. And I typically would never ask a question of another speaker, but I had to ask this question because I did not hear public safety or fire service in his presentation at all. So I asked the question, is the fire service in your community involved with the planning you're doing? Or do they drive down the street and happen to stumble across a new construction and have to ask the question? And guess what? The fire service and public safety was not part of the planning process whatsoever.
right,
None.
Right.
And I never got invited back to speak at that event again. And it's frustrating. Over the years, I helped several organizations develop a 5-year plan, their 5-year plan, only to find out a year later, the printed report was laying on a shelf somewhere and nothing was done with it.
Yep.
Last year I ran for township supervisor. I lost the election. It was 2023. And part of one of the things I wanted to do when I ran was, if I were to get elected, was to spend the money to develop a plan, not a study. We didn't need another study, but develop a plan and then use the plan to leverage the SAFER grant to pay to implement the plan. I didn't win the election, so it never went any further. So,
well, and I think you're right. And I mean, when you look, I mean, in Pennsylvania, municipal governments are required to have a comprehensive plan. A lot of other states are the same. And the reality is some work I've, working with another partner business, a lot of comprehensive plans for fire, EMS, emergency management, police is one page. It's one paragraph per subject matter, and then that's it. And it's an afterthought. And like Chief Keiser said, we need to step up to the plate and get people to understand what we do. We don't do that really well. I think one of the comments here from Julie Phelps, she's 100% spot on. Change isn't easy a lot of times. And, being part of the brotherhood as well and the sisterhood, we always say we want change until change arrives, and then we fight it like crazy. But she's right. It can be hard, but it's inevitable. You need to prepare for that. You need to plan. You need to adapt. Your community changes, all these different things. And we lose track of that, and we shouldn't. So.
And we'll move on from the plan. I just want to make this comment. I was recently in the courthouse here in Mifflin County. They had a little QR code you could scan because they're working on the comprehensive plan for the county. So I scanned it. It took you out to a survey, a monkey survey. There was one question about public safety.
Right.
One question about, we talked about parks, they talked about recreation, they talked about business, they talked about highways, they talked about housing. There was one question, and the question basically was, are you satisfied with public safety in your community?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah.
a comment from Dan Nescott.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah,
I was
saw
just gonna
that,
say,
Dan.
it goes back, it goes back to, they know that we'll figure it out one way or another, and so they're taking advantage of us. That
An
will
old friend
happen.
of mine used to say, we're our own worst enemies. Cat up a tree, call the fire department. Water in my basement, call the fire department. I'm not giving you any more money. We find a way to raise the money, and on and on and on. I can remember attending a public meeting with a fire department that did an excellent job of sharing their finances with the public. They hid nothing. And they shared the number of hours that they were training year to year, and the number of hours on calls, and the number of hours maintaining the equipment, and so on and so forth. And a lady stood up in the audience and said, well, if you don't have enough money, why don't you do more fundraising? And there was an attorney sitting next to me, and I tapped him on the leg and I said, get ready to duck. Now, I was no longer the fire commissioner, so I didn't have to worry about being politically correct. And I said, ma'am, I said, did you hear what they just told you earlier? The number of hours they spend fundraising? Let me ask you a question. If they come to your house tonight, do you want somebody that's great at calling a bingo game? Or do you want somebody that knows what they're doing because they're well trained and well equipped? She didn't ask any more questions the rest of the night, and I obviously didn't get a Christmas card from her. So the comment from Hempfield Township, the supervisors have really stepped up with purchasing apparatus, building stations. Our issue was fundraising and lack of manpower to do it all. We're waiting on paperwork from our township with the price of apparatus and running a 30-year rescue pumper. We cannot afford to raise those funds. Our apparatus are purple, new colors, blue and gray. The future is here now. Need to change from our traditions. We are required to train, getting firefighters certified, run calls, and train. Vance, need to have plans. Short range, 1 to 3, mid range, 4 to 7, long range, 8 to 15. These can include facilities, apparatus replacement. That way, if leadership changes due to retirement, termination, how come this thing keeps jumping her? Catastrophic event, the organization has a vision for the future. Look at FDNY after September the 11th, 2001. They were able to continue forward progress in years to come. Yep. Chris Childers, as growth requires change, this change will be painful. As communities begin to grow, so must the infrastructure. Just as water, roads, sewer are important for growth, so are emergency services. The fire and EMS service requires upkeep and reassessment. In some communities, the time for having your cake and eating it too is over. You must take action. Reaction is more costly than preparation. Another comment, brace for change, adjust and adapt. Look, I don't want it to sound like we're picking on local government. We have to be partners with local governments. And sometimes it takes a period of time to educate them on what we need. And we have to be able to do it with data. Okay. Chief, I'm sure if with you having some admin help, and I'm sure you're using some type of incident reporting system, you probably have a lot of data available at your fingertips.
Oh yeah, we just we're working on our year-end report, and we had 6,033 hours of, basically like you said, events, fundraisers, keeping the fire station open. That's not emergency time. And if you divide it out by 366, because last year was a leap year, it's 16 hours a day.
Yep.
That's two people working 8 hours.
Yep. And you know, in a lot of cases, some of these mergers or consolidations ultimately lead to combination departments.
Mhm.
Because even after you do the merger, you find out that you're gonna have to have some paid people. I mean, and it all depends on your community. I mean, if the majority of your volunteers work a day shift, where's the staffing come from? Ultimately, it's a local government decision. It's a local decision. Rob, I can remember one of the first meetings we went to with the state. I think both of us were a little scared at first.
A little scared?
Because here we are, we're from the government and we're here to help you. And right away the shotgun was leveled because
Yep.
and then we told them, we're not here to tell you what to do.
Right.
We're here to tell you that we will do what we can to support you in any way we can. Ultimately, this is your decision,
Yep.
not a state decision.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
it
we
took
had
all the thunder out of the room.
and that's what you have to do. You have to set the playing field immediately so everybody understands. And that's why I always ask people, you know, why are you calling me about this, you know, this specific thing? Because, you know, we've dealt with that before, you know, when I was working with you or, you know, while I've been in, you know, business for myself. You know, you got to ask the hard questions because you don't know what's going on in the background. And sometimes it's very unappealing what's going on in the background. And you got to figure out what's going on to make better decisions. But yes, we've had that shotgun leveled at us a couple different times. And we walked out unscathed each time because, you know, I think we stood up to the challenge and told people exactly why we were there. We were there to help. We truly were. And if you didn't want to do it, we weren't going to force you to do it. So
Here's a comment from James. It says, Chief, Chief, and Chief. We're a very rural municipality with 8 different fire departments. Municipal funds are limited, and there are currently no provincial state funding. Our largest funding source at the moment is a weekly 50-50 lottery. Personally, I can see some consolidation in the future, but it will be painful for some to give up what they see as their domain. Oh, so sorry, Chief Keiser. I'm a local councilman, and the other councilman is a volunteer firefighter. It's going to be a hard sell. There's no doubt about that, James. You know, I mean, look, folks, when you consider that some families, generations of families have been associated with the same fire department for 100+ years. And now you're talking about taking that identity away and changing the name of the organization. And I also understand the issue with funding. I mean, there are communities in Pennsylvania where you could raise the tax millage as high as the law would allow, and it still wouldn't be enough to fund the fire department because the tax base simply isn't there.
Right.
And it's on the backs of property owners in Pennsylvania. It comes through your property tax. I mean, look, when you live in a community that has a fire department that only has a population of 500 people, there is no tax base. And you're asking them to try to raise the money for a $600,000 fire truck. You know, it's none of it's going to be easy, but if we don't sit down at the same table and talk with one another, nothing's going to change. You know, Dan commented again, you know, we're all going in after 107 years as a volunteer fire company. I was against it, but I'm on board with the changes now. Hempfield Township has 4 paid drivers and 2 township stations now covering 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So, all right, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. So, and I think we've covered a lot of the comments. I don't see anything in the Q&A. So here's a comment. Smoky Lake Fire Rescue is paid on call. This thing keeps jumping around me. Other departments in our region county as a paid chief deputy administrator, we have to look at what we save rather than what we cost. We're the best bang for your buck, never mind the cost of insurance if you have no fire department. And Dan's telling us more about Hempfield Township. 48 years in one department. So, all right. So before we move on, Chief, I'm going to ask you if you have any last minute comments or final words of wisdom for our listeners tonight.
Well, the one thing I didn't mention that I think is the success of our merger is that both departments pushed all their chips to the center of the table. There was no holding back of anything. We, I guess, left the past behind and moved forward. And and I was even called out at a couple times. I would say, well, years ago at Liberty, we used to do this, and you'd get called out. We're not Liberty anymore. We're Garden Spot. And we worked through that. We're going on this past January 1st, we're 12 years into it. And I think we've moved past of who we were and now moving forward. But I hear of other consolidations, mergers, where maybe some of the stations hang on to different funds or different things like that. And I don't think it's positive. If you're gonna merge, you need to be all in, push all your chips to the center of the table and start anew.
Okay. Rob, before I ask you, we have a comment from Julie Phelps. We're currently a 100% volunteer, but we're looking at least discussing daytime pay coverage for 2 people. Life today has changed from when the fire service started. Businesses are less likely to let folks leave work for calls. People, of course, must work to pay bills, and I feel the culture of today's society has changed, and many folks are looking for what's in it for me. We cover 93 square miles, 1 whole township, as well as 3 partial townships, and have 3 stations. But we only have 10 people that regularly show up. Thank goodness our county adopted an auto aid for confirmed structure fires. This has helped, but I'm sure it's not fixing the problem in the future, and all the department's memberships are down. Sometimes it's kind of like being an alcoholic. You have to admit you have a problem before you can solve it. The biggest struggle with mergers is members identifying not wanting to give up power of an authority. That's certainly true. It truly has to be beneficial for everyone involved. You hit the spot. Department name and truck colors. A paid fire chief in Hempfield Township in 2021 has certainly made a difference. Also, Julie mentioned we also only have fire, no medical. And Robert's asking Rob to explain the difference between consolidation and merger.
Where do you want me to start there, Ed?
Well, basically, and we mentioned it earlier, but what's the major difference between the term consolidation and merger?
A merger, one or more of the entities that are participating are going into an existing entity, and a name may or may not change. That's the basic. The consolidation concept is the consolidation. We start whatever that surviving entity is, as I said earlier, whether it's a nonprofit for volunteers, municipal based, whether it's combination or fully paid, it's a brand new entity from the consolidation aspect. There's not. And this isn't a process we're dissolving anybody. We're going to legally take you and make you part of something else. We're creating the next chapter, for the history of your organization and your community.
So, I know when we did our merger consolidation, we ended up with a new name. But as I recall, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, we kept Highland Park as the existing entity for the purposes of the IRS to begin with.
Right.
So we didn't have to pay the extra money to register a brand new entity.
Right, because they were already a 501c3, and we determined that was the best tax determination for the new company. So we just merged East Derry into Highland Park, and then did a legal name change is what we did.
There you go.
And with Garden Spot, what we did, when we talked about doing this, I asked, Darryl to be part of it, because Garden Spot is such a good case study on so many different levels of things that they did. And But there was a consolidation concept where we started a brand new corporation and the companies came into it. So, there's a couple different ways. And what we try to do is, as the one gentleman, Hempfield's one of my clients, through their comp plan that we did. It just, we got to get beyond it. Darryl's right. We got to put all the chips in. This is about us coming together, doing what's best for the community.
So Dwight McConnell asked the question, do you think a volunteer company that runs an average 10 calls a year should consider the merger? Chief, I'll throw that one to you first if you have an opinion on it.
I mean, if there's somebody for them to merge with, yeah.
Mhm.
If they're running that low a volume of calls, they need to connect with somebody else because I guess you got to look at the return on investment.
Okay, Rob?
And yeah, I mean, we just did a couple recently in different parts of Pennsylvania where small department, small volunteer companies were merging in with a larger neighbor where they were originally thinking about just dissolving. Limited manpower, limited calls. And when we sat down and looked at everything, it was a win-win all the way around. And as I think it's Brian here asked, we do look at those kind of things like response times and deployment and staffing and that kind of stuff. And I want everybody to keep in mind when we're talking about this in a lot of ways, this is really governance and an administration effort. This is the organizational structure. The deployment, staffing, all those type of things are part of, that's the bread and butter of what we do. I look at this process, this is sort of a two-headed animal. It's that governance and administration part, and it's the operational part that is the other half of it. And whether some people agree with me or not, and I'll argue this, if the governance and the administration and the leadership isn't good, the operations is going to falter. We're just not going to do it like we should be doing.
So Julie, and I know you can't speak on this. Can you type and tell us where you're from? Because you're asking a question about considering a fire district. And depending on where you are in the country, that may be feasible, and depending on where you're in the country, it may not be feasible.
Oh,
Athens,
okay.
Ohio. So
Yeah, I'm familiar with Ohio, and yeah, there's different options in every state. It's sort of interesting when you go and you're looking around. Some states call stuff regionalization that involves more than two municipal governments or county governments. If you want to say local government, you can have districts, special districts, authorities. It just depends what it's sort of the local regional name. And you can call a lot of different. Some people that I know call themselves a district, and they're nowhere close to being a district. They just sometimes they think it's what's the cool to put in a name. But yeah, there are options in Ohio. There's a lot of different states: South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wyoming, Texas.
and that's the nice thing about having you, like with you as a consultant, is you have access to an attorney. Okay, so those legal questions, can I do this in this particular state? I mean, because in some areas of the country, a district has the ability to tax.
Yep.
Okay, to levy a tax. Well, in other areas of the state, you could call it a district if you wanted to, but all you are is a district geographically, and you have no more authority than you did before. So
they just think it's sexy. The name's sexy now. They call themselves something different. And you're right. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. Just be what we need to be. Keeping up with the Joneses doesn't help.
Yep. So we're really getting into some dandies now. Here's one from James. There was a failed attempt to merge several years ago. How long before the next vote can come up for another vote? There have been a lot of changes since the last vote. It's been about 10 years. My own opinion is that would depend on. I mean, I've known some of these people that have voted 4 times in 1 year, 1 calendar year,
right,
before they finally got it across the finish line.
James, my advice to you is figure out what people are comfortable with. I just had one recently, and I'm not going to mention any names. And I asked the guys, we just crossed the finish line about a week ago with the last part of the project. And I asked the guys, they said they tried this 10 years ago. And I'm not saying this, I'm not going to say it exactly the way they said it to me, so I don't accidentally offend anybody. but the question was put to, was out there, and they said, well, the reality was the biggest blankety blank of each department is no longer with us. Now we can move forward. It's an unfortunate reality. I'm not going to come in and tell you what to do. I've said that before. I don't live there typically. I don't work there. Typically, I don't have family there. So you have to educate myself and my team to know those intricate things that are going on and what's driving people. And the biggest question is, what are the deal breakers? What are the things that we can't talk about or not doable? And we figure out why, and then we focus on all the other stuff. So there's ways around it, but you gotta be smart. You gotta be smart. So,
All
and
right.
sometimes you
So
gotta take it on the chin and swallow your pride.
I'm gonna go back here quick to the chat, and then we're gonna move on to the questions, because there's 2 questions in the QA.
Okay.
I gotta catch up here now because this thing's been scrolling so fast on me. Can you explain the difference between a district authority and a municipal fire department?
Yeah, the districts and authorities and special districts, typically, if I remember, I think there's 14 or 15 states that actually has legislation that allows you to do this. And in the states that allows, they actually have the taxing authority. The taxing authority is allowed to do that. A municipal department is typically a department within a government entity or a regional government entity, and they have to rely on that government entity over top of them to provide the funding. The department doesn't have the ability to generate the funds on their own. So that's typically what the difference is.
Okay. Larry Penazar has a question. If one department wants to merge with another, do their municipalities need to okay that?
Well, it's really based on where you are. There's some places where the municipal government has the right to make sure a volunteer department, they're sort of the one that gives the final say if somebody can be chartered or incorporated. Other places, if you're a volunteer nonprofit, the entity can take those actions on their own. I look at it as a fact is that if it's a combination system or an all volunteer staff system, we need, and even it's a fully paid system, we need our elected officials to be a partner in this whole thing. So yes, I think they need to be sitting at the table. There needs to be some discussions, education, that communication. Let them know what's going on, the reasons why you're doing it.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Q&A and then we're gonna move on here because we're coming up on an hour. So here's Steve McCarthy. When you have a strong and well-financed department, how do you react to a department that is struggling and wanting to merge with you? Rob, I'll let you go first, and then Chief Keiser, I'll give you a chance to jump in.
If you get to the point where you have a situation like that, typically both departments realize there needs to be some compromise. The better funded department has to help educate the other agency, the other entity. Those folks in that entity have to understand that maybe financial discretions or mismanagement or just the lack of funding has driven things certain ways, that you're going to have to come up with some kind of equal plan to make sure this works. You want enough money to survive and thrive and do well and do what Mr. and Mrs. Smith expect us to do when they call 911. So you're gonna have to find that balance. Because sometimes what I find, the people who are well-funded, like one project I recently worked on, was overfunded, I hate to say. And what we did, they were too focused on shiny fire trucks, and we refocused that onto better volunteer member benefits, and hopefully it will transition into better benefits and stuff and wages for the future career staff there. You can have all the trucks and apparatus in your world, but if you don't have well-qualified people and enough of them to staff, why do you need it? So you got to look at the whole thing.
Chief Keiser, do you want to weigh in on that one?
I would just say somewhat similar to the situation that we had. We all sat down at the table, but we were basically taking the perspective of let's be proactive versus reactive and help out our neighbors. I mean, your mutual aid company is your neighbor, no different than Mrs. and Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I struggle with that too, Rob. So if they got a fire truck and they're going to be coming in the door behind you, you want to make sure that you're supporting them as well.
Okay, so Mike Polzelli has a question, and Rob, I'll give this one to you first, because this is a little more legal, I guess, a little more technical. So we have two fire companies in one fire department. We're looking to consolidate the companies into one fire department. Is this something that can be done without changing the department name? Athens, PA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We'd have to look and see if there's any restrictions in your, depending when you were founded, whether your charter and or articles of incorporation have some kind of restriction. If it is, we can work on that and get a solution to that. But yeah, we have it a lot of times where people don't change their name. Or sometimes people have been operating, believe it or not, under a name that's actually not their legal name, and we have to deal with that. So yeah, there's definitely solutions to that. There's definitely solutions
Okay.
to it.
What happened to Chief Keiser? Where did he
I
get?
don't know.
All right, so here's a comment from Al Duffy in Florida. In Florida, the special independent fire districts do have the power to levy a tax or millage for the operations of the fire department. This past August, my district, where I currently a commissioner, was successful in increasing our tax rate by 0.5 mils.
Yep.
So
Good for them.
And we will have, when you get your email tomorrow, listeners, or whenever you get it, it may be a day late because of some things that are going on with Sam and I tomorrow. Rob's email address will be in the message that you get. If you have specific questions about your state or how Rob might be able to help you, I'm sure he's not going to object to you dropping him an email and being able to help you out. So I don't see any more. We got another question. All right, this is going to be the last question, and we're going to wrap it up. This is from Kirk Faust. How does the department know if a merger or consolidation is right for them? Knowing the department needs is to do something different. So I think what he's saying is he knows the department has to do something different.
Yep.
But you have to sit down and have open and honest discussions with whoever the players are. And that includes your local government. It includes your membership. It includes yourself. Something I've always asked myself when I had to make a decision about something is, I always ask myself two questions. Will my organization be better off if I say yes to this? And will the public be better served? And if I answer yes to both of those questions, regardless of how I feel personally, I got to go along with it. Because at the end of the day, it's all about, is the organization going to be better? And if the organization's better, in my opinion, the people we're supposed to serve are being better served. So, that's my opinion and my belief. Rob, what say you? And then we're going to.
Commissioner, and I say that out of respect because you earn it, and you were a good guy to work with, and our teams on many different levels. But you said it's spot on. There is nothing else for me to say. That's with that subject. I mean, you got to have that. You got to just come to the determination and yourself.
Brian Alball says, and will the public support it? And again, it's important. Chief Keiser mentioned earlier, and he's reconnecting with us. He mentioned earlier they had public meetings. They kept the public informed of what they were doing.
Yeah, and they were great interactions, and that just made a big difference. You got to communicate.
I don't see anything else in the Q&A. Rob, you offered your final words of wisdom. I ran my mouth long enough tonight. Chief Keiser, do you have any final words before we move on to our closing tonight?
Oh, I will say this, we built Garden Spot Fire Rescue to grow, and we were approached by a bunch of different other local departments, and for whatever reasons, they didn't want to sign over, but we are currently right now in negotiations, and almost like Rob said earlier, some of the old pappies of the old guard are gone now, that we're actually the two other departments they, with East Earl Township, they ended up merging from our merger. But now here, 12 years later, we're at least starting the talks with them. And so then we would be, what is it, 6 stations strong. It's 2 departments, but 3 stations that we would join with them. So we've started that process and see how it's all going to work out.
Okay, so I'm going to offer as Chief Keiser, we lost you for a little bit and you're back with us. I just want to make sure you're okay with it. I told all our listeners that when we send our email out with the certificates and stuff for this and where the recording is and what have you, we're going to include Rob's email address. So if people have questions specific for him, are you okay if we do the same thing with your email address?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the email addresses for Rob and for Chief Keiser will be in the follow-up email you'll receive from our wonderful marketing director, Sam Tallarico. Thank heavens he's behind the scenes and helps me so much with this stuff. And my email address will be included as well. If you drop me an email, if you want some advice, if you want to ask me about the merger I went through, if you want to pick my brain on what I went through as a state fire commissioner over 14 and a half years, and whatever advice I can offer to you. And if I don't have an answer, I'll tell you I don't know, but I typically know where I can direct you to get the answer you're looking for. So as we close tonight, I want to thank our listeners for being with us tonight. I especially want to thank our panel members for sharing their experiences with us. I want to remind our audience there'll be a brief survey we would like you to complete. Please keep an eye open in your email that'll have your certificate of attendance attached for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to providentins.com and you'll receive that link in an email within the next day. Again, it might be a day late because Sam and I got a lot going on tomorrow. Please make sure you check your spam or junk email before sending me an email saying you haven't received your certificate. For those of you that are using the webinar as training for a group of people, when you receive the thank you for joining us email from Sam, there'll be an Excel spreadsheet attached. Please, I'm begging you, please use that spreadsheet to put the names and email addresses in for certificates. It makes my life a whole lot easier. I don't have to try to retype everything from your email with those names. You can view previous webinars at www.providentins.com using the training and resources link in the upper right-hand corner of the page. While we don't have a date set as of yet, we will be doing a webinar late in February with Chief Al Yancey of the Manuka Fire Department from Illinois. And the title of his presentation is, "You're the Fire Chief, Now What?" Stay tuned for future information. Until we meet again, stay safe for your family's sake. Good night, all.